Dark orchestral music fades in. A smoky beer hall is shown in slow motion with a crowd of men in brown uniforms raising their arms. The camera drifts toward a single column. Dumb, a bomb hidden inside. On the night of November 8, 1939, Adolf Hitler was delivering one of his fiery speeches inside Munich's Burgerbruckler, a vast beer hall filled with loyal supporters of the Nazi regime. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and fanatical cheers. Behind him, inside a column near the podium, sat a bomb. The man who planted it was no soldier, no general, no spy. He was a carpenter. His name, Georg Elser. Elser believed this night could change the world. If his plan worked, Adolf Hitler, the dictator who had plunged Europe into war only 2 months earlier, would never leave the building alive. At precisely 9:20 p.m., the bomb was set to detonate. It would bring down the ceiling directly above Hitler, crushing him and his closest allies. And then, history itself would be rewritten. Georg Elser, the lone assassin narrator. Johann Georg Elser was born in a small village in southern Germany. He had no powerful allies, no army behind him, no secret intelligence service feeding him information. He worked with his hands, crafting furniture, fixing broken wood, living a quiet life. But inside, Elser carried a burning hatred for Hitler and the Nazis. He had watched as Germany spiraled into dictatorship. He saw the arrests, the disappearances, the violence against Jews and political opponents. He feared that another world war would destroy not just Germany, but Europe itself. Unlike many others who plotted against Hitler, Elser acted completely alone. No group, no co-conspirators, just a single man with determination, patience, and skill. In the summer of 1939, he began secretly preparing. He stole explosives from a quarry where he once worked. Piece by piece, he smuggled detonators, wires, and powder into Munich. And then night after night, he snuck into the beer hall where Hitler gave his annual anniversary speech, slowly hollowing out a pillar with homemade tools. It took him more than 30 nights. He hid in the shadows until the hall closed, chiseling in silence until his hands blistered. By late October, the bomb was ready. The fateful night, November 8th, arrived. Elser set the time pencil. A chemical fuse designed to ignite at exactly 9:20 p.m. That gave him a narrow window to escape Munich, slip across the border into Switzerland, and vanish. As Hitler mounted the podium, the audience erupted in cheers. He was supposed to speak until at least 10 p.m. That was the tradition. If he followed the usual schedule, Elser's bomb would strike him down in front of hundreds of witnesses. But fate had other plans. Hitler spoke more quickly than usual that night. Outside, heavy fog had blanketed Munich, making air travel dangerous. His pilot urged him to leave earlier than scheduled to avoid the weather. At 9:07 p.m., 13 minutes before the bomb detonated, Hitler abruptly ended his speech. He walked out, climbed into his car, and drove away. At 9:20 p.m., Elser's bomb exploded with terrifying force. The ceiling above the podium collapsed. 8 people were killed, 63 wounded. The blast left a crater in the beer hall floor. But Adolf Hitler was not among the dead. Instead, the dictator sat on his train rushing back to Berlin, alive and unscathed. Elser's fate narrator. Meanwhile, Elser's escape unraveled. As he tried to cross the border into Switzerland, German guards grew suspicious. They searched him and found incriminating objects, sketches of his bomb design, fuses, and tools. He was arrested on the spot. For the rest of the war, Elser was imprisoned. Hitler, furious, but fascinated by the attempt, wanted him kept alive for a public trial after Germany's victory. That trial never came. In April 1945, just weeks before the Nazi regime collapsed, Elser was executed at Dachau concentration camp. His attempt had come agonizingly close. 13 minutes had saved Adolf Hitler. The pattern of survival. This was not the first attempt on Hitler's life, and it would not be the last. Over the course of his rule, historians estimate there were nearly 40 known plots to kill him. Some were grand conspiracies involving generals and politicians. Others, like Elser's, were the work of individuals acting alone. Yet somehow, against overwhelming odds, Hitler survived every single one. Was it sheer luck or something more? To understand this strange pattern, we need to step back and look at Hitler's rise, his enemies, and the dangerous game of resistance within Nazi Germany. Early opposition. From the moment Hitler seized power in 1933, opposition brewed quietly in the shadows. The Nazis crushed political opponents, banned opposition parties, filled concentration camps with anyone deemed a threat. Still, not everyone in Germany fell in line. Some resistance came from ordinary citizens, workers, students, clergy, but much of it, surprisingly, came from inside the military and government itself. Officers who once supported Hitler grew uneasy as they watched him gamble recklessly with Germany's future. For them, it wasn't just about morality, though many were horrified by Nazi crimes against Jews and civilians. It was also about survival. They feared Hitler's decisions would lead Germany into ruin. And in the end, they were right. Henning von Tresckow, the officer who turned one of the most determined figures in the resistance, was Major General Henning von Tresckow. Tresckow came from a long line of Prussian military officers. At first, he admired Hitler's energy, his ability to restore order after the chaos of the Weimar years, but admiration soon turned to disgust. By 1941, Hitler had ordered the invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. Tresckow believed it was strategic madness. The Russian front was too vast, the Soviet army too numerous. Germany could not win. Even worse, Tresckow knew about the atrocities being committed. He learned of mass shootings of Jews, political prisoners, and civilians. For him, the war had turned into a moral catastrophe. He concluded there was only one solution. Hitler had to die. Hitler would be flying back from the Eastern Front, stopping briefly at Smolensk. It was the perfect opportunity. Tresckow prepared a bomb disguised as a gift. 2 bottles of Cointreau liqueur. Inside the package was an explosive device armed with a time pencil fuse. He persuaded a fellow officer, Lieutenant Colonel Heinz Brandt, who was traveling with Hitler, to carry the package onto the plane. Brandt believed it was simply alcohol meant for another officer in East Prussia. At 3 p.m., Hitler's plane took off. On board were Hitler, Brandt, and the bomb. The device was set to detonate within 1 hour, somewhere over Minsk. The plane should have exploded in midair, killing everyone on board. But once again, fate intervened. When Brandt stowed the package, he placed it in the unheated cargo hold. At high altitude, the freezing temperatures disabled the chemical detonator. The bomb never went off. Hitler landed safely. Realizing the failure, Tresckow quickly phoned Brandt and claimed he had given him the wrong package. The next day, co-conspirator retrieved the bomb and replaced it with actual bottles of liquor, erasing the evidence. Another chance had slipped away. Hitler's shifting habits. By now, Hitler's enemies had noticed a disturbing pattern. He often escaped death not just through luck, but because of his strange, unpredictable habits. He rarely kept to a fixed schedule, canceled trips at the last minute, arrived early to meetings, or left long before anyone expected. Hitler himself once allegedly said, "The only antidote is an unsteady life." And he was right. His unpredictability made him a difficult target. Still, conspirators refused to give up. They believed killing Hitler was the only way to end both the dictatorship and the war. New faces in the resistance. By late 1943 and early 1944, a new figure began to dominate the resistance. Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg. Unlike Elser, who worked alone, or Tresckow, who acted within the chaos of the Eastern Front, Stauffenberg rose to lead a coordinated network of military conspirators. They would attempt not just to kill Hitler, but to overthrow the entire Nazi regime in a single strike. Other attempts unfolded, each one a mix of courage, desperation, and failure. Axel von dem Busk, the human bomb. In November 1943, a tall, striking young officer named Axel von dem Busk volunteered for a suicide mission. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and nearly 2 meters tall, he embodied the so-called Aryan ideal. The plan was simple and terrifying. During a presentation of new army uniforms at Hitler's headquarters, von dem Busk would conceal a grenade on his body. When Hitler approached, he would detonate it, killing them both. But before the demonstration could take place, an Allied air raid destroyed the shipment of uniforms in Berlin. The presentation was cancelled. Weeks later, von dem Busk was severely wounded in combat, losing a leg. His chance to kill Hitler was gone. Suspense builds toward Valkyrie. The conspirators were running out of time. Germany was collapsing on all fronts. Allies had landed in Italy. The Soviets were pushing westward. And still, Hitler survived. The resistance knew their window was closing. If they did not act soon, Hitler's downfall would come not from within Germany, but from total military defeat. In early 1944, all eyes turned to Stauffenberg. He was brave, determined, and willing to die for the cause. His plan, Operation Valkyrie, would become the most famous and daring assassination attempt of them all. But before we reach that dramatic moment, we must understand how years of failure, luck, and sacrifice built up to this turning point. Claus Graf von Stauffenberg was not an ordinary soldier. Born into German nobility in 1907, he grew up surrounded by tradition, honor, and the strict discipline of the Prussian officer corps. In the early years, he admired parts of Hitler's rise. Like many Germans, he welcomed the end of chaos in the 1930s. But as the war unfolded, Stauffenberg witnessed firsthand the brutality of the Nazi regime on the Eastern Front. He saw villages destroyed, civilians massacred, and prisoners executed. The treatment of Jews and the atrocities committed by the SS disgusted him. By 1942, he had joined a secret circle of officers determined to overthrow Hitler. But fate would soon mark him for an even greater role. In April 1943, while serving in North Africa, Stauffenberg was severely wounded in combat. He lost his right hand, 2 fingers on his left, and 1 eye. The injuries could have ended his career. Instead, they gave him a strange sort of freedom. He was reassigned to staff duties in Berlin, close to the heart of the Nazi regime. From that moment on, Stauffenberg was convinced. The only way to save Germany was to kill Hitler. Chapter 2. Planning Operation Valkyrie. By 1944, Germany was collapsing. The Allies had landed in Italy. The Soviets were pushing west. Cities lay in ruins from relentless bombing. The writing was on the wall. Inside the Wehrmacht, the resistance gained momentum. The key was not just to kill Hitler, but to seize power immediately afterward, before the SS or loyal Nazis could regroup. The plan they developed was called Operation Valkyrie. Originally, Valkyrie was an emergency order designed by the Wehrmacht to maintain control in case of civil unrest. Stauffenberg and his allies secretly rewrote it, turning it into a blueprint for a coup. The idea was simple, but daring. Kill Hitler with a bomb. Blame his death on the SS, claiming they tried to seize power. Activate Operation Valkyrie to mobilize reserve troops across Germany, arrest top Nazi leaders, disarm the SS, and seize key communication centers. Form a new government that could negotiate peace with the Allies. But everything hinged on one impossible step: killing Hitler. Stauffenberg volunteered to do it himself. He was perfectly placed, a high-ranking officer, with direct access to Hitler's briefings. His injuries, ironically, made him appear less suspicious. Few believed a wounded war hero would risk his life in such a way. Chapter 3. The July 20th bombing. July 20th, 1944, Wolf's Lair, East Prussia. Hitler's heavily guarded military headquarters was surrounded by barbed wire, minefields, and thousands of soldiers. But inside, meetings were almost casual. Hitler prided himself on being close to his officers, speaking to them without too much formality. That small detail gave Stauffenberg his chance. On that day, Stauffenberg arrived with a briefcase. Inside were 2 British-made explosives. He planned to arm both, doubling the force of the blast. But time betrayed him. The meeting was rescheduled earlier than expected. Under pressure, he and his aide, Werner von Heffen, managed to arm only one of the bombs. Stauffenberg entered the conference hut, a long wooden room with windows open to the summer air. Hitler stood at the far end, leaning over a massive oak table covered in maps. Stauffenberg placed the briefcase just a meter away, close to Hitler, and quietly excused himself. At 12:42 p.m., the bomb detonated. Explosion sound effect, the hut erupted in fire and splinters. Shockwave ripped through walls, shattering windows and throwing men to the ground. 4 officers were killed instantly. Dozens were wounded. From a distance, Stauffenberg saw the smoke rise. He believed it was over. Hitler must be dead. He and Heffen raced back to Berlin, ready to launch the coup. But Hitler was not dead. At the very moment of the explosion, another officer had moved the briefcase slightly, pushing it behind the thick leg of the oak table. That single move shielded Hitler from the full force. When the smoke cleared, Hitler staggered out of the wreckage. His uniform was shredded, his hair singed, his arm burned. His eardrums were damaged. But he was alive. The invincible Führer had survived again. Chapter 4. Aftermath and executions in Berlin, Stauffenberg and his allies activated Operation Valkyrie. Orders went out to reserve units to seize key buildings and arrest SS officers. For a few tense hours, the coup seemed possible. Confusion spread. Some officers believed Hitler was dead. Others were unsure. Then the phone rang. It was Hitler himself, alive, furious, and speaking directly to loyal commanders. He demanded loyalty and ordered the immediate suppression of the coup. The illusion collapsed. Within hours, the conspirators were rounded up. Stauffenberg, Heffen, and several others were executed that same night by firing squad in the courtyard of the Bendler Block, the army headquarters in Berlin. Over the following weeks, the Gestapo unleashed a wave of terror. Nearly 200 people connected to the plot were executed. Some were hanged with piano wire, their deaths filmed as a warning. It was the last best chance to kill Hitler, and it had failed. Chapter 5. Why Hitler Survived. Narrator. Looking back, the question remains, how did Hitler survive nearly 40 assassination attempts? Part of it was security. He was always surrounded by guards. His food was tested for poison. Routes were checked in advance. His exact movements were kept secret until the last minute. Part of it was luck. In Munich, he left 13 minutes early. On the plane, the detonator froze. At Wolf's Lair, the briefcase was nudged just far enough to save him. Again and again, chance tipped the scales. But part of it was also fear. Many who wanted Hitler dead hesitated when the moment arrived. Some could not bring themselves to sacrifice their own lives. Others feared what would happen if they failed. And behind it all was Nazi propaganda. Every failed attempt was spun as proof of Hitler's destiny, that Providence itself protected him. Too many Germans, each survival made him seem untouchable, chosen, almost immortal. Closing reflections, narrator somber, reflective. On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler finally met his end. Not at the hands of assassins, but by his own. In a bunker beneath the ruins of Berlin, with the Red Army closing in, he shot himself. But the haunting question remains, what if? What if Elser's bomb had gone off 13 minutes later? What if Tresckow's device had not frozen in the cold? What if Stauffenberg had managed to arm both explosives? Would millions of lives have been saved? Would the Holocaust have ended sooner? Or would another Nazi leader have taken his place, prolonging the war? We will never know. What we do know is that courage existed even in the darkest times. Men like Elser, Tresckow, and Stauffenberg risked everything and paid with their lives in an effort to stop a dictator. Their failures remind us not of weakness, but of determination. A reminder that even in the shadow of tyranny, there were those who fought back.